Hey, what's up, y'all? Y'all good? I hope so. Okay, so where we left off was with Monica trying to steal her husband goodies and for him to wake up and look at her like, "What you doing?" And she's like, "I just thought that this would help us." And he said, "Well, you were wrong." And he politely got her up on off of him, and he went back to sleep. So Monica was not able to go to work that morning. After he forced her off of him, the only thing Monica could do was go into the bathroom and cry. She never thought that things would be that way. She didn't think anything would stop her from being a mother, and she never thought that Nate would react the way that he had. The look that he gave her when he woke up was as if she repulsed him. After freshening up, she got back in bed. Nate was asleep, and she wanted to move closer to him and put her arms around him regardless of what he did, but she just remained on her side of the bed. When she woke up that morning, she called and let Tabitha know that she wouldn't be into work because her and Nate were at it again. Tabitha asked if there was anything she could do, but Monica said that it was up to her to find out what needed to be done. Monica spent hours in bed trying to figure out what could she do to save her marriage. Then after about 4 hours of racking her brain, she had an idea. And just thinking about it made her feel excited. So she ran down to their office, got on the computer. She felt like this was the only chance that her marriage had left. And she said a little prayer and she typed in adoption in the search bar. Now, Nate, he called his younger brother Tim and asked if he could meet him at the park because he needed to talk. He said ever since he was 8 and Tim was 6, whenever he had something on his mind, he would always go to his little brother. So Nate and Tim were at the park. The weather was beautiful, children playing and parents conversing. Tim wanted to know why were they there. Nate said, "I told you I wanted to talk. And what's wrong with the park? It's gorgeous out here. And I thought you'd want to get out for a minute since you said you had writer's block. And don't you like the sounds of the kids playing? They sound like us when we were their age. When Dad used to bring us here every weekend. You don't miss that?" Tim said, "No." And Nate was like, "Well, that's probably because you're out here every weekend tossing the football to Kevin." Tim told Nate that, "Look, I don't even want to talk about this." Because he knew that his brother was about to go into his place of sadness. And he couldn't help but think about the night he got a call from Nate at 1 in the morning. His voice was slurred and he said he needed to talk. Tim asked him where was he, and he said at the bar. But not knowing which bar, Tim had to convince Nate to give his phone to someone in the bar so that he could get directions. About a half hour later, he finally made it, but when he pulled up, there was an ambulance out front and he saw Nate being rolled out on the stretcher. He told them, "Hey, that's my brother. What happened?" And they told him it was alcohol toxicity. So he rode with Nate to the hospital. They got him into the ER, pumped his stomach, and when Nate sobered up, he told Tim that he would never have kids. And Nate knew that was why his brother didn't want to have that conversation. He was scared. He didn't know what type of emotional trauma it might bring up. And just then a football rolled their way. Nate picked it up, told the kid to go long, and threw it to him. Tim watched and asked Nate, "What type of stuff is on your mind?" And Tim said, Nate said that. That right there, that's what I wanted. I wanted a son, a family. I still want one. So Tim asked him if he was going to adopt. Nate said, "No, I want my children to be biologically mine." And Tim says, "But you said that Monica couldn't." And Nate interrupted him and told him, "I'm not talking about with Monica." "Well, how then?" "I'm thinking about getting a divorce." Tim was astonished. He said, "You're going to divorce her?" Nate said he didn't say he was going to. He said he was going to look into it. He had an appointment with a divorce attorney later on that day. Tim was like, "Nate, I can't tell you what to do, but you would be wrong. You know how much Monica loves you. And I've liked Monica from the very first day you introduced her to me and Robin. Just think about this before you do something that you'll regret." Nate told Tim that he didn't ask him there for his opinion. He just wanted to get some things off of his chest and to let his brother know what he was considering. Then Nate stood up and passed Tim a check. He knew his brother didn't want to take it, but trying to be a writer was not bringing in any money at that time. So Nate told him to go ahead and take it. If you won't take it for yourself, take it for Robin and the kids. He gave his brother a hug, thanked him for meeting him out there, and told him not to worry about him. Everything was going to be all right on his end. Then he left. So back over there with Monica, after typing in the word adoption, Monica spent 3 hours searching adoption agencies and gathering as much information as she needed to present the idea to Nate in a way that he understood it, and most importantly, understood that this was their only recourse. And even though she had mentioned adoption on the day that they found out that she would never get pregnant and they quickly disagreed, Monica thought maybe it was just because he was so distraught. But now, since some time has passed, he may reconsider. Monica was really content about this. She was just going to do more research and then visit one of the agencies. But then she looked at the clock and realized that she really could visit one today. It was only 3 o'clock. So she called the agency to make sure it was okay for her to visit. They said yes. She ran upstairs to hop in the shower, but just as she was about to step in, her phone rang and it was Tim. Monica could tell in Tim's voice that something was wrong, even though he said everything was okay. Then Monica said, "He told you about the argument?" Yeah. Who else would he tell? I'm just calling to make sure you're okay. Yeah, I'm fine. And then Monica had a quick thought, and she asked him if he was busy at the moment. He said no. So she said, "Can you go somewhere with me in about 20 minutes? I guess. Where are we going?" "Just be ready in 20 minutes, and I'll tell you when we're on the way." Around 4 o'clock, Monica pulled into the True Home Adoption Agency parking lot. Tim looked up at the sign, looked at Monica, and asked, don't you think Nate should be the one sitting here?" "Well, I'm not bringing a baby home today. I'm just here to get some information." "But Tim, do you think this is a good idea?" Tim hesitantly smiled and said, "Well, if you think it's a good idea, then I think it's a great idea. But Nate is the one you need to be worried about." So while Monica and Tim were down at the adoption agency, Nate was down at his attorney's office trying to find out how much he would have to pay his wife if he divorced her. Nate's attorney told him that he knew it sounded urgent on the phone, but he didn't think it was going to be that. He really liked Monica and thought that things were going well between the two of them. Nate responded, "Things aren't always as they seem." So here it is, Nate. The business was started after you were married. Right now, it's worth about $60 million, and that's based off the last time that I checked. So just off the top of my head, she would be entitled to half. Nate jumped up out of his chair and was like, $30 million? That's insane. Ain't no way I'm giving her $30 million. That doesn't even make sense to me. His attorney said, "Calm down. Listen, there was no business before your wife. So the argument would be that Monica took care of home. She took care of you, and she provided a stable life that allowed you to succeed. And on top of that, she had a job herself. And all of that was vital to your success. And with that type of argument, she'll win." Nate couldn't believe it. He was like, "And just like that? It's that easy?" His attorney paused and said, "Well, there is one more thing. You do have a clause in your prenuptial agreement that if your wife committed adultery, then she forfeits any money entitled to her if a normal divorce was filed." Nate thanked his attorney for the meeting, but he told him that would never happen. His attorney didn't think it would because he always saw Monica as a good woman. He was just obligated to bring it to Nate's attention. Nate stood outside of his attorney's office in disbelief. It was crazy to him that she would be entitled to half of his fortune, and he was not about to reward her with millions of dollars for lying to him. He was just going to have to think of another way, or just accept the fact that he would never have the family that he wanted. So until he can find out what that other way is, he better start treating her a lot better before she get out there talking to an attorney herself and learn just how much she would be entitled to. Over at the adoption agency, Monica and Tim met a nice lady by the name of Mrs. Walcott. Monica explained her situation about the premature menopause and how her and her husband really wanted a family, even though she lied when Mrs. Walcott asked if her husband was interested in adopting as well. Monica just didn't want anything to get in the way of their second chance. Mrs. Walcott logged Monica and Tim into their database. She told Monica that she didn't want to assume wrong and asked if they were looking for an African American child. And Monica told her, "You're correct." Mrs. Walcott was happy about that because she said that unfortunately there were a lot of African American kids in need of a home. Once they were all logged into the database, she left Monica and Tim to look through all of the profiles and told her if she wanted more info on a particular child, just click the photo. After scrolling for a while, Monica came across an adorable brown-skinned baby boy with dimples, bright eyes, and curly hair. She told Tim that he looked like Nate, and the best part about it, the baby's name was Nathaniel. Mrs. Walcott printed out the picture, gave Monica an application form and all of the literature she needed to start the process. They left the agency, she dropped him off, and now she made it home. She was a little hesitant to go in because she really didn't know how she was going to present this to Nate. She knew he was probably still mad at her for trying to take his goodies, but she was like, he is just going to have to get over it because this was more important. So she went inside, but noticed that the lights were dim and there was a single candle on the dining room table. She put her things down, walked over, and saw 2 dozen roses in this beautiful crystal vase. And there was a note. She opened it and it read, "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry for last night. I've been behaving like a fool. You deserve so much better than this. I promise I will make it all up to you. Love, your husband, always and forever." Those last words made Monica cry, and it confirmed to her that he really didn't want a divorce. And then she noticed that the lights brightened in the room, and they asked her if she could ever forgive him for behaving so foolishly. Monica said that he was not the one who needed to be forgiven, it was her. And she apologized for all of her lies and for making him wait 3 years. He walked over, wrapped his arms around her, and said, "You know I still love you, don't you?" And she said, "Of course she did." And she asked him, how could she not know? And he said, "Because of how I've been treating you." Monica told him that it was all in the past. I mean, if that's what you want to think, girl. But let's continue. The next morning, Nate made it into work and he, had last night on his mind. Monica had apologized for everything, even about suing him. Nate made her believe that was enough to erase the threat she made, and it was one that he could never really forget or forgive her for. But he let her say what she had to say and then said his sweet nothings, took her upstairs and put it on her. He knew that her body was calling, so he put his body all over her body just to see how deep was her love. And he knew that when she started hollering out, "Do you still love me?" He knew it ran deep. So he said, "Yes. Yes, I do. I will always love you." And that was enough for her to rain down on him. Once they were finished, they lay face to face, and they asked Monica if they were going to be okay. Monica grinned and said, "If you ask me, we're already okay." And that was all Nate needed to hear to know that phase one of his plan was working. Divorcing her would just have to be placed on the back burner until he could find a better way to proceed. So Nate snapped out of his thoughts about last night, stepped out of the elevator onto the floor of his business, nodded his head at the 2 receptionists, but he noticed that Tori, his secretary, hadn't made it in yet. But it was only 8:30 and she usually makes it in around 8:45. Nate made sure he kept up with all of his people. When he stepped into his office, he was startled to see someone sitting behind his desk. Nate closed his door, but the man didn't look up. He got closer and he saw that it was Barry Atkins from upstairs. He was the first person Nate met when he opened his business there. Barry had been nothing but a friend from the first day they met. He was a really good guy, very upbeat, always had a smile on his face. So to see him with his head down on Nate's desk, that made him a little worried. Barry, what's going on? Are you okay?" Barry looked up and it looked like he had been crying. Then Barry said, "That bitch." And then he got up out of the chair and started pacing back and forth. "Who? Who are you talking about?" "My wife. She's having an affair." "Lisa?" Ain't no way Lisa is having an affair. That lady loves you like crazy. Really? That's what you think, Nate? Then Barry threw some pictures on Nate's desk of his wife and a younger man in some very explicit positions. And you could tell that the pictures were taken with a long range lens from outside of a hotel room. Dang, man. Look at this mother. He is half the man that I am, younger, and he's having a body party with my wife. Nate didn't know what to say. So he asked Barry, why did she do it? She never seemed like that type of person. Barry said he didn't know. The only thing he could possibly think of was her complaining that he was always working, that they didn't do things anymore. And when he was at home, he was still distracted with work. But to do me like this, she could have told me first. Nate wanted to tell him that it sounded like she did, but he didn't want to add fuel to the fire. Barry looked at Nate and told him that he wanted him to go somewhere with him. So he pulled up at his wife's school where she was the principal. After receiving the photos from the private investigator on yesterday, Barry didn't even go home because he couldn't bring himself to face his wife. But now here he was about to go in and tell her that they had to get a divorce. It was over, and he had the pictures with him. Nate asked him if he wanted him to go in with him, but Barry said no. But he thanked Nate for bringing him that far. Barry gave Nate a hug, and Nate could feel that big old man trembling. Barry got out, and Nate watched Barry walk toward the school with his head hanging down in sadness. For the rest of the day, Nate was no more good. He wondered how would he be if he was in Barry's shoes, even though he was trying to divorce Monica. He wondered if he could handle seeing his wife in the arms of another man. Like, what would he do? Throw himself off of something very tall or just chase the man down? But the crazy part about it was that Nate knew that he needed exactly that to happen to him in order to divorce Monica without giving her half of his fortune. Nate made it home, and Monica was so happy to see him. She jumped into his arms as soon as he sat his things down. She was just so happy, especially after last night. They ate dinner together, and Nate was trying to be as attentive as possible, but he still had Barry on his mind, and he wondered how would his life be if his wife wasn't there to greet him like she just did. They finished dinner and had another meeting in the bedroom. After Monica had fallen asleep, Nate just laid there looking into the darkness. He whispered her name, and when she didn't answer, he pulled the blankets back and went out to the balcony. Nate was thinking about what was most important, having a wife or having a family, because he knew he couldn't have both. Then Nate pulled the phone out of his pocket, stared down at it, trying to decide if he should make this call. He knew he shouldn't do it, but he did it anyway. The voice on the other end of the phone sounded a little groggy. Hello? I woke you, didn't I? I was just nodding off. Are you okay, Nate? You don't sound too good. I just have a lot going on. I really need to talk to you tomorrow. Well, I don't think we can avoid that. I work for you. No, not like that. Can we have lunch or dinner? Because I really need to talk. I need to talk to you. There was a moment of silence, but then the woman finally said, okay, just let me know when and where. When Nate got up the next morning, he felt distraught, but he tried to hide how he was feeling from Monica. So he tried to eat the breakfast that she made him and pretend like everything was okay. But she could tell something was bothering him. What's wrong, Nate? He told her nothing. But after he got back in bed, after making that phone call, he felt guilty about his decision to seek a divorce from her. Then he reiterated that everything was fine. So Monica said, well, if that's the case, can I take you to dinner tonight? Because I'm happy that things are getting back on track and I wanted to talk to you about something. Nate was curious about what she had to talk to him about, but he just wasn't in the mood to get into whatever it was right then. So he told her sure, she could take him to dinner. Then he left for work. On his way to work, his phone rang and it was Barry. He was calling to thank him for being there for him yesterday. Nate could tell from his tone that he wasn't okay, so he asked him if everything worked out. There was a moment of silence, and Barry said that they were getting a divorce. Nate told Barry that he would be in the office in 15 minutes and he was going to come up to his office to talk. But Barry didn't go to work. He was just too depressed, so he stayed home. And that's where Nate went. Even though Barry was trying to convince him that everything was okay, Nate went anyway. Barry opened the door with a glass of that brown in his hand. He thanked Nate for stopping by. When Barry went to get Nate something to drink, Nate was just looking around at the beautiful home. Everything was beautiful. Wood details, chandeliers, the high vaulted ceilings. But even though it was beautiful, it felt cold. Barry came back with some orange juice and offered Nate a seat. Then he said, "So yeah, we're getting a divorce." "Well, you're doing the right thing, Barry." Barry said, "It wasn't me who asked for the divorce." And it's funny because she got caught, but I'm begging her to stay. Wait, she wants to leave? Yeah, she says she's in love. Barry stood up and walked to the fireplace. He said, "I'm 45 years old, and I've been married to her for 25 years of my life. I gave her everything, and now she tells me she wants to leave, and she's in love with another man. Now what do I have? I know I have my company, my money, houses, cars, and boats, but my wife is gone." Barry turned to look at Nate and said, "I remember when she went on and on about wanting to have kids. She always wanted a family, but I told her no, that I wanted to devote as much time as I could to the business. And when things slowed down, then we could start talking about kids. But that time never came." And then it dawned on Nate why the house felt so cold. There was no family. And he thought if Barry would have had kids when he was 25 or 30, they probably would have been around 15 years old now, and they could help him through this. Then Barry said, "But I guess the good thing is we never had kids, so I don't have to worry about her taking me for child support and alimony." Nate spent a little more time with Barry, and then he headed on to work. It was now about 3 p.m. He didn't even realize that he had stayed over Barry's house that long. When he walked in, he told his secretary to cancel whatever he had left for the day. She tried to tell him that the appointments for today had already been rescheduled once. And so he told her, "Well, reschedule them again for next week, Tori. Can you do that?" Yes, sir." Nate walked into his office and slammed the door. He was already feeling bad this morning, and now he was feeling even worse after talking to Barry. Nate didn't realize how long he had been sitting in his office chair until he heard a soft knock at the door. He looked up towards the clock, and it was 6:15. He told the person to come in, and it was his secretary. "Everyone is gone for the evening. Is there anything else that you need for the day, Mr. Kenny, before I head out?" "Come in, Tori," and closed the door. Tori did as she was instructed. Nate got up from his desk and moved closer to Tori. He knew what he was about to do was wrong, and he should have thought about it, but he felt like it was something that had to be done. And given his circumstances, there was no other options. Nate closed the distance between them. He grabbed her by her waist, pulled her into him, and kissed her deeply. Nate felt her body relax, as if she was giving him permission to do whatever he chose to do with her. Now, Monica is sitting over there on the living room sofa in her new dress that she bought to wear to dinner tonight. She had the adoption packet that she was going to present to her husband. She had taken it out over 100 times, practicing what she was going to say. But she was getting worried because it was a few hours past 6:30. She started to feel like there would be no dinner tonight. So she called Tim to see if he had talked to Nate, and he said that he hadn't, that maybe he got caught up with a client. And Monica said, well, even if that was the case, he usually still answers his cell phone, and I've called him more times than I can count. Tim told her not to worry. He probably had a good reason and would be home eventually. Monica sure hoped Tim was right, and she told herself not to worry. She took off her dress, put on her night clothes, decided to get something to eat, but she didn't have an appetite. She looked over at the clock, and now it was 11:30. She was trying not to worry, but all types of thoughts were running through her head. Maybe not being able to have kids had just become too much for him, and he just decided to leave. Or maybe he had found the adoption papers. But she doubted that because she was real careful with hiding. So she was like, Monica, snap out of it. Nate wouldn't just leave me like that. He loves me. He told me that. And I can feel it in my heart. Monica turned off the TV, slid under the covers, told herself everything would be fine, and when she woke up in the morning, her husband would be in bed by her side. Well, Nate is over there in his birthday suit in bed with his secretary, wide awake. He didn't know what time it was, maybe 5 or 6 in the morning. He couldn't really tell because the shades were drawn. After pulling away from their kiss yesterday, Tori said that she thought he wanted to talk to her over dinner. He said that he did. She wanted to know about what, but he told her he wasn't sure about it just yet, but he'd know once they ate. But now he didn't want to be out, so he asked her if they could go to her apartment. She gave him a strange look, but said that it would be fine. They made it to her one-bedroom apartment located on the south side of town. Nate was just looking around, making observations. In his mind, he was saying that her furniture was cheap, but it was well maintained. The decor looked more like something for a college student and not a 29-year-old woman, but he wasn't surprised because he had been to her apartment quite a few times before. Tori made them dinner. They had a few glasses of wine that Nate noticed came in a bottle with a twist off cap and tasted like spiked Kool-Aid. But it did what it was supposed to do, and that was to calm his nerves. So Tori asked him, so why are you here sitting on my sofa again after 4 years? Nate said it was because of Barry. And he told Tori all about Barry's situation and that the moment Barry said that he was happy that him and his wife didn't have kids, he could see the look in Barry's eyes that said that he wished that he had. And it was in that moment that he decided that he was not going to be Barry, but he knew he would if he continued to allow what's been going on in his life to happen. Tori was so confused. She was like, and what does that have to do with me? Nate ignored the question and asked Tori how did she feel about him. Tori couldn't believe it, and she told him that he didn't have the right to ask her that question now, and he knew exactly why she felt that way, and it was because of what happened years ago, just before he met Monica. Nate had hired Tori 1 week, and the next week, they were having meetings in the bedroom. She was beautiful, intelligent, and catered to his every need, beyond what she was paid for as his secretary. But Nate knew that he couldn't be in a relationship with her, even though they saw each other a couple of nights a week and went on dates, then back to her place or his for fun. A relationship was not on his mind. It lasted for about 3 months, and Nate kept telling himself that he would let things continue until she started expecting things and started getting those feelings women usually get when they want to be more. At about the 3.5 month mark, Tori started asking where he saw them in the future. Nate tried his best to ignore those questions. Well, the night of Tori's birthday, after spending the whole day together, they were back at her place in bed after working out, if you know what I mean. Tori asked him again, where are we going with this? Nate was like, Tori, like, do we really have to talk about this? She sat up on her elbow and told him, yes, we need to talk about this because I need to know. I deserve to know. We've been seeing each other for almost 4 months now. I love being with you, seeing you every morning when you come into the office, and I just keep asking myself, why can't I see you at home too? And there it was, Nate thought. She's either talking about living together or getting married. Nate told her that couldn't happen. Why not? I love you, Nate. Tori, don't say that. But I do. Don't you feel the same about me? Nate got out of the bed and started putting on his clothes as Tori followed behind him saying, just tell me why we can't be together. You're always talking about getting married and having a family. So why can't you have that with me? Like, why can't it be me? By this time, Nate had made it to the door and he turned to her and said, because it just can't, okay? Period. Tori stood there looking so sad and Nate wanted to grab her and hold her, but she would think there was a chance for her and he knew that there wasn't until last night. After talking to Barry and realizing that he would never have a family of his own, Nate knew that Tori, the woman who loved him deeply in the past, could rescue him from that fate. So Nate asked her again, Tori, how do you feel about me? I want to know if there is still something there. Why do you want to know this now? Like all of a sudden. You don't get it. I loved you, begged to be with you, but you wouldn't allow it. And now you have the nerve to ask me how I feel about you? What happened back then? Are you serious? Nate lied and said he wasn't ready. And Tori knew it was a lie, and she told him that he could get out because you dumped me. Then 6 months later, I heard you were engaged. So saying that you weren't ready, that's a lie. She then stood up from the sofa and turned her back to Nate. And Nate knew he had no other choice but to tell her the truth, even though it was going to hurt. So he said, when we first got together, I told myself that meetings in the bedroom and occasional dates were as far as it could ever go. Tori turned around and asked him why. Nate said, because you worked for me. I had just started my company, and how unprofessional would it have been for me to be sleeping with my secretary? Tori lowered her head and said, I see. Nate jumped up from the sofa and told Tori that things were different now, and we can work if you just tell me how you feel about me. Tori said she didn't feel anything, and Nate quickly let her know that was a lie. Because why haven't I ever heard you with another man, seen you with another man since me? You still look at me the same when I walk into the office. Tori, I know when a woman has feelings for me, especially you. So why won't you tell me how you feel? Why? So you can just leave me again? No, that's not why, Tori. Well, it must be because your wife can't have children and you don't want to end up like Barry. So you just want to use my body to have kids? Not quite, but something like that. And if you still care for me, we can do that because I still care for you. As he held her close to him while she was trying to push herself away. But he knew if she really wanted to pull away from him, she could have. But I loved you and you left me anyway. I know, but that won't happen again. And he said this while planting soft kisses on her neck while unbuttoning her blouse. She was begging him to stop, but Nate knew she wanted to continue because her body grew weak. So he carried her to the bed and started removing everything. She was still telling him not to do it in between her heavy breathing. But baby, Nate was on his silk vibe, honey, like, let me lick you up and down till you say stop. He positioned himself atop of her trembling body. He allowed his pipe to gently graze her sensitive parts while Tori looked him in his eyes, grabbed his face, and told him, don't do it if you're not sure. Nate said, I've never been more sure of anything in my life, as he slid in and felt her melt up under him. And now it was the next morning, and he lay there remembering last night, feeling his body nearing the moment of release, and Tori telling him to take it out because she wasn't on any BC. But Nate pulled her in tighter and went in a little deeper until they both sang in harmony. She wasn't mad at him at all. She enjoyed every bit of it. She told him that she doubted that she would get pregnant because she had just finished her cycle, but she wanted to make it very clear that she was not fit to just be some woman on the side. She would not be a baby mama. Nate said, I don't want you to be. If you're my children's mother, then you will be my wife. Tori couldn't withhold her happiness. She screamed with joy, kissed him all over his face, and then asked him, so how are you gonna work this all out with your wife? Nate didn't have a clue, but now it was 6:08 in the morning, and the first thing he had to do was go home. All right, y'all. That's the end of that part. Tell me what you think. Get down in the comments. Let's talk about it. And next, we're going to get introduced to Lewis. All right? Because he's going to play an intricate part in this little situation. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And I'll talk to y'all later.